The US didn't even get an invitation this time. On May 30th, red flags fluttered outside the Wan Chai police station building in Hong Kong as representatives from over 60 countries and UN officials gathered to sign the Convention on the Establishment of the International Mediation Institute (IMI). Dubbed the Oriental Hague, this historic summit conspicuously excluded one regular attendee: the United States. Once a dominant rule-maker in institutions like the UN and WTO, the US was shut out entirely. A European diplomat privately remarked that China had broken its customary restraint, directly excluding the US, a move seen as the first post-World War II instance of a nation daring to slam the door on America. Led by China, the IMI is the world's first intergovernmental legal organization dedicated solely to resolving international disputes through mediation. Why create such an institution when similar bodies already exist? The answer lies in the shortcomings of existing legal mediation frameworks, which can no longer keep pace with global needs. Take the International Court of Justice (ICJ) in The Hague, for example. While not entirely ineffective, its very name court implies an adversarial, litigation-focused approach, which is insufficient for resolving complex international conflicts. What's needed is a softer, more collaborative method like mediation, and that's where the IMI steps in. Moreover, despite its international label, the ICJ lacks membership from major powers like China, the US, and Russia, undermining its credibility and influence. Worse, its operations often raise eyebrows. Recently, the ICJ's attempt to arrest former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte of political theater, orchestrated with current President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., hardly a pursuit of legal justice. These flaws highlight a growing demand for a fair, impartial, and globally representative institution. The IMI answers this call, starting with a founding membership predominantly from the Global South, 10 countries in total, including China, Pakistan, Belarus, Sudan, and Algeria. Notably absent, the US and other Western powers. Even US Secretary of State Marco Rubio grumbled that an international organization without American participation cannot be taken seriously. When the US criticized China's launch of the IMI in Hong Kong as potentially dividing the UN family, the outcry only underscored the initiative's strategic significance. History has shown that America's hysterical opposition often signals that China is pursuing a transformative, correct path. The US's double standards on international rules are an open secret. As a UN Security Council permanent member, it owes over $1 billion in UN dues, treating international institutions as financial ATMs while criticizing China's efforts to build new mediation mechanisms. It has weaponized visas to block Russian delegates from UN meetings, turning global bodies into political pawns, a hypocrisy that reveals its true goal: safeguarding hegemony and suppressing any challenge to its judicial dominance. The Western-led international judicial system has long been a tool of political manipulation. The so-called South China Sea arbitration farce, for instance, ignored facts and international law, serving as a pretext for US-led containment of China. Such politicization of legal tools has laid bare the essence of Western judicial hegemony. In contrast, the IMI embodies Eastern wisdom of harmony as a priority, advocating non-confrontational, non-aligned dispute resolution antithetical to the West's zero-sum mindset. By breaking the Western monopoly on global justice, it offers a fresh Oriental solution to governance. Based in Hong Kong, a global financial and legal hub, the IMI benefits from the city's independent legal system and international standing. Here, it can operate free from visa politics and Western interference, ensuring fair, efficient mediation. This not only challenges Western judicial hegemony, but also shows nations the possibility of resolving conflicts autonomously. Hungary's recent withdrawal from the International Criminal Court, along with similar moves, reflects growing dissatisfaction with Western-dominated systems and injects new momentum into the IMI's mission. Why the US fears the International Mediation Institute? The root of America's anxiety about the International Mediation Institute (IMI) lies in the challenge it poses to US hegemony. For decades, the US has weaponized control over international judicial bodies, packaging its own interests as global rules to politically suppress rival states. Now, with the IMI established in Hong Kong beyond the reach of New York's influence, America has lost its absolute dominance over international dispute resolution mechanisms. This terrifies Washington. Not only could its carefully constructed judicial empire lose authority, but the entire global governance order might undergo a fundamental shift. US-led international institutions are notoriously costly and inefficient. The Western preference for litigation, hiring lawyers, and pursuing lawsuits works well for powerful nations like the US, which can afford it. But for developing countries, especially in Africa, this system is exploitative. The Democratic Republic of Congo (DRC), for example, spent $3 million on ICJ fees only to face diplomatic isolation. Over the past 20 years, African nations poured $17 billion into Western law firms, yet received compensation totaling less than a fraction of that amount. Even European countries like Hungary have grown disillusioned, with Budapest formally withdrawing from the International Criminal Court (ICC) to protest Western bias. The IMI differs fundamentally from Western courts. Its founding members are nations genuinely committed to fair dispute resolution, mostly developing countries historically marginalized in global affairs. Here, whether you're a European economic power or a small African state, your voice matters equally. The mediation framework prioritizes consensus over confrontation, ensuring no bias towards stronger parties. Observers have wondered, why aren't Russia or India among the founding members? Both belong to organizations like the SCO and BRICS, but their absence makes sense. In multilateral forums, India has a habit of obstructing progress, vetoing initiatives while demanding great power status. Russia, meanwhile, likely prioritizes existing alliances over joining a new framework at this stage. Their exclusion is not permanent. The IMI's doors remain open, but membership requires a commitment to constructive collaboration, not political posturing. Will the US or other Western nations join? The IMI isn't here to replace existing institutions, but to offer an alternative, especially for poorer countries tired of Western-imposed legal traps. If the West seeks to participate, they're welcome, but with conditions. Nations that habitually break rules like the US, which has withdrawn from numerous treaties while weaponizing their clauses, as seen in its selective use of UNCLOS to foment regional conflicts, will find the IMI's standards non-negotiable. Allowing the US in now would risk letting a bull into a china shop, undermining the IMI's mission before it even begins. Darwin Port crisis, a case study in bad faith. As Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese prepares for a visit to China, his government is threatening to terminate China's 99-year lease on Darwin Port, a brazen act of betrayal with grave implications for international trade credibility. Both the ruling Labour Party and the opposition have vowed to seize control of the port, using vague pretexts like returning it to Australians while ignoring the facts. In 2015, when Chinese firm Landbridge Group acquired the lease for $500 million Australian dollars, Darwin Port was a neglected backwater, bleeding money with minimal shipping traffic. Australia's former government saw it as disposable, assuming the Chinese investment would fail. But within years, Landbridge transformed it into Northern Australia's most advanced deep-sea port, handling over 26 million tonnes of cargo annually and turning profits. Now, jealous by its success, Australian politicians are attempting to nationalise the port through coercion, either forcing a voluntary sale or invoking eminent domain. This reeks of hypocrisy. Australia gladly accepted Chinese capital when the port was a liability, but now weaponises nationalism to seize assets. Worse, the US is egging on this aggression, eyeing the port's strategic location for its anti-China agenda. Such unilateral breaches of contract aren't just an insult to commercial integrity, they're a dangerous precedent. China will not tolerate this theft of its legitimate investments. The Darwin Port saga underscores a troubling trend: Western nations touting rules-based order while violating those rules whenever it suits their geopolitical goals. From helping the port turn profitable and alleviating the Northern Territory government's debt crisis to investing over $83 million Australian dollars in upgrading facilities, which boosted total vessel tonnage by 95.7%, and actively fulfilling social responsibilities to drive local economic growth, Landbridge Group has brought systematic positive changes to Darwin Port. In 2018, after Australian pro-US politician Scott Morrison took office, his administration pursued a strongly pro-American policy targeting China. By 2020, Sino-Australian relations had drastically deteriorated. China completely suspended coal imports from Australia and diplomatic ties worsened accordingly. Morrison began pushing for a review of the Chinese company's lease of Darwin Port and started threatening to retake the port, though no action followed. When Anthony Albanese took office in 2022, as a politician advocating economic ties with China, he did not want to offend China over the Darwin Port issue and halted the review, putting the matter on hold. The question then arises, why did Albanese quickly stop the review upon taking office, and why is he now seeking to retake the port 3 years later? The Albanese government's dilemma stems from two main factors. One is to build momentum for the upcoming general election, and the other is to alleviate US tariff pressure on Australia. In May this year, during Australia's parliamentary election, the Labor Party and the Liberal Party had the highest but closely matched approval ratings. As Labor Party leader, Albanese faces a deadlock in polls where the two parties' support rates are nearly identical. To break this impasse, the Labor Party must court more conservative voters, requiring Albanese's government to adopt a tough foreign policy stance, particularly toward China. Using national security rhetoric around the Darwin Port issue has become a convenient tool for political posturing, making this essentially a commercial dispute fabricated by the Australian Labor Party for political gain. Additionally, the Trump administration not only imposed reciprocal tariffs on global trade partners, but also an extra 25% tariff on aluminum products, severely impacting Australia's mining industry. In the face of Trump's tariff war, Australia dared not utter a word of protest. Albanese even directly stated that the Australian government would not retaliate against US tariff policies, effectively surrendering. Australia is bound to reach a no trade agreement with the US in a humiliating manner, but it is not entirely without leverage. That leverage is the Darwin Port. The timing of Albanese's threats to retake the port coincides with US tariff policies targeting China's shipping industry, a key goal of Trump's agenda, which includes forcing Chinese companies out of the Panama Canal's operations, imposing high fees on Chinese-made and Chinese-flagged commercial vessels, and seizing ports operated by Chinese enterprises near the Panama Canal. Albanese's actions are a clear attempt to please Trump and secure better terms in US-Australia trade negotiations by trading Australia's economic sovereignty. In response, China's ambassador publicly stated 4 points. First, the Darwin Port lease signed by Chinese enterprises and the Australian government is legal and market compliant. Second, China's investment helped the port become profitable, making Australia's actions a betrayal. Third, this is a commercial partnership that Australia should view appropriately. Fourth, China and Australia are comprehensive strategic partners, and Australia should create a fair business environment for Chinese companies. These 4 points from China's ambassador are both a reminder and a warning to Australia. Unilaterally tearing up the agreement without legal justification would send a dangerous signal to global investors. Australia's political intervention in commercial contracts sets a dangerous precedent. When governance prioritizes political expediency over the rule of law, it shatters foreign investors' confidence in Australia's business environment, particularly in long-term infrastructure and energy projects. Some in Australia have hinted at compensating Landbridge Group, the Chinese leaseholder, but the mindset that money can justify breach of contract betrays guilt. No financial payout can restore the contractual integrity or moral credibility Australia has squandered in this debacle. Over recent years, Sino-Australian relations have weathered numerous storms, often driven by Australia's over-politicisation and securitization of China-related issues. Thanks to pragmatic efforts on both sides, ties have recently stabilized. However, weaponizing the Darwin Port issue under the guise of national security would create another toxic precedent, undermining the hard-won progress in bilateral trust. Such actions risk inflaming public tensions, eroding government enterprise confidence, and turning a commercial hub into a geopolitical pawn. The US has intensified military deployments in Darwin, rotating Marines and expanding bases to position the region as a frontline of its Indo-Pacific strategy. Forcing out Chinese investment clears the way for this militarization, but repurposing the port for military use would strangle local economies. Commercial shipping would yield to naval drills and strategic stockpiles, displacing livelihoods and destabilizing community security. Darwin Port's operations should adhere to market rules and legal frameworks, not become collateral in Washington's power games. Albanese's threats to revoke the lease are likely empty posturing. Dependent on Chinese trade, the port's economic viability hinges on Sino-Australian ties. Terminating the lease would trigger massive legal penalties beyond Australia's fiscal capacity. With elections concluded, hyping anti-China narratives serves no purpose. The path forward is clear. Australia must return to rational diplomacy, uphold contractual obligations, and prioritise long-term strategic autonomy over short-lived political stunts. For a re-elected Albanese government, rebuilding a stable, mutually beneficial relationship with China and balancing multilateral commitments remains a defining challenge. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot. See you next time.